So for fun, if you want Harry, the Dresden Files, and if you decide you're like me and you're super busy, but you like to listen to books, audiobooks, Audible has all of them, the entire series, narrated by James Marsters. This is the guy who played Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Mm.
and he is awesome. He is a really, really good voice actor, and all us Dresden File fans just are like, yeah, that's the voice of Harry Dresden and Thomas and all these other people. So he does a great job. It's for entertainment purposes only, but he does a fine job of explaining like how fairies work and how fairy logic works and how law works and why creatures that exist on the two pillars, although he won't explicitly say they exist on the sides, but when they do, they're absolutely bound by law. They absolutely, if they cease to do that polarized essence of themselves, they cease to be, because that's what makes them. So, you know, when you deal with Queen Mab or something like that, she is what she is the Queen of Air and Darkness, and to those of us that live, we might say that's she's evil from a particular perspective. In the grander scope of things, you know, you're kind of like good and evil is really relative when the whole thing is one thing, and the whole thing is functioning as one thing. So when you look at the summer court of fairies, for instance, they seem, you know, summer and bright and everything, but summer also has its downside, right? It can get too hot. It can completely scorch everything. It can be just as light has the capacity of being just as destructive and oppressive as darkness.
Right.
The difference is how things are accomplished, which is in fact, yeah, here we go. We'll be talking about this in the advanced class today. So this is all advanced stuff. I'm not going to spoil it, but the universe did me a solid. And as I was going through and kind of reviewing everything this morning, kind of getting my head in the game, I realized there's a quote in the Kybalion that directly relates to the material that we'll be talking about from the mystical Qabalah and the advanced studies stuff. So you can see why I use the two, because it's like one will say this thing that here's your key, and now the lock is over there. So then you just march yourself over with your key, and now you open the lock. And that's almost always how esoteric writing works. No single book is going to give you all of it in one place. Some might do a real fine job of it, like the Secret Teaching of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. That's a really good text. It's loaded. It's like multiple books all stacked together. Yeah, go ahead.
Question.
Yes,
Is
please.
there like several different ones? Because I have one and then I think you have a different one. I don't know. Is this the one that you have, or do you have a
Is
different one?
that by Manly P. Hall? That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
And it's really
You
thick.
were like saying something about different pages, and for whatever reason, I couldn't find the section in the book. And I'm like, do we have two different books or something?
I don't know. I pulled mine off of the Internet Sacred Text Archive, which I can give you a link to. Let's
I just got mine.
there we go. Oopsie. There we are. Share screen. So this is the Internet Sacred Text Archive. This is essentially, I've been using this for years, actually decades, to be quite honest. And because it is absolutely like, if you're on a budget, but you need a library, this is where to go. I suddenly found myself on a budget and needed a library after a move when my entire library was stolen off the back of a truck. You know, we were moving from Vegas up here. And, you know, the thing is, my policy is always most valuable stuff goes on the end. So it's last in, first out, right? So my library with just dozens of all these kind of books gone. I honestly think it's funny in some ways, because I'm like, wow, those guys are in for a real big surprise, you know, because they're really heavy. And so they're probably like, oh, these are really good. And then they're like, what is all this, you know? And so, yeah, to me, because that was all that was lost. But I found it here. And so You can then just sit here and click on like the secret teachings of all ages. Obviously, I use it a lot because it came up first. And then boom, here's the text. And so it's all hypertext linked. So as I go through and select an area, and you can see I'm drawing all the lit up ones or the links that I've been using for different classes over the last couple of years to highlight. So as we're going through, I would then pull from that. So like the last time we talked about the Kabbalistic keys of the creation of man, and I drew that from the bottom of this right here, where scroll all the way down. And it's that whole dialogue that he says, in this ritualistic drama, possibly derived from the Egyptians, Adam banished from the Garden of Eden. When you're involved in certain esoteric communities, often they will involve ritual endowment that has kind of a play acting that goes with it. So various members of that community that will then fulfill a role. And so one might stand in the place of a god or the god and administering covenants, say, to the group. And then two people might be present, usually man and woman, that are then representative of the body of the members. And the principle that's taught here is work by proxy, meaning if I'm over here and I can't perform the work, I can have another person, if I give them power of attorney on a spiritual level, right? And then they can then act in my name. So, and then they can, so in those ceremonial instances, the officiator and the two people up there typically are then functioning as members of the whole. So when they make a covenant or something, then we all make a covenant, but it's as if we were already at the altar. It saves a lot of time, but it also teaches a really larger principle that a lot of the things that we do because this exists, right? That things are in place so that we have connection. When I talk about like working through the tree in different worlds, that whole idea is a concept of this, that I can leave little avatars of myself around to function in proxy of myself, right? Like little embassies. That was a term I used once upon a time, like little embassies of myself, so that it's always me. And then recognizing it's still all me, it makes it easier. But so this is where I drew that from, and it's on page 128, it looks like. But that's of this text in printing. I can't speak to the really nice one that you have because I don't have that one. But it would begin on page 120. Oh heavens, my glasses. 123. Okay, so hello, hi, and welcome. So, all right, so we're talking about just texts and tools. I pointed out to everyone, here's the Sacred Text Archive, which is a thing that I use in place of having a physical library. And plus, I just don't have the room in my house for all these books. This is an amazing resource, by the way. You can get lost in here. So as a beginner, I highly recommend that before maybe you buy a book, that you look through here at the Sacred Text Archive. It's at sacredtext.com. That you might be able to find it here for free. And then you can always print out, what you need if you need that, or read it on your phone, your tablet, I don't know. There is an advantage to having a book, which is that you get to hold it, right? So I do buy books, don't get me wrong. I mark the crap out of my books. And then I have other books that I keep notes of the markings in my books so that I don't get lost like today, because there's so much. But just I'm trying to pattern for you things that have been success for me. So if that works for you, awesome. It works for me, and that is to have like physical books that you cherish, that you write in, have a book that you keep track of that, because you can't always fill the margins. Like the margins are really tiny in some of these, So you might want to just then have a journal, or this is kind of a journal. This is a class journal right here. And that you can then keep track of, okay, this is what we talked about today, or this is what I read today, or this is what I learned today. And then kind of put that in the simplest terms possible. We talked about Typing and writing and stuff like that. I love, by the way, typing. When I was a kid, my graduation present from high school wasn't a car, it was a Smith Corona 2 electric typewriter. That tells you how much of a writer I was at the time. Like, I was just overjoyed. So I love typing, and I'm really fast. But there's an advantage to writing because it forces you to be concise. It does. It does. Otherwise, you can get lost in just the exposition. It forces you to take a bunch of words and narrow it down. And it was at the feet of master writers and professors that I learned this, like, just because I'd keep handing me my stuff and then they'd say, go rewrite it and cut it in half. And then I was like, well, how do you do that in Start way? And you'll write it by hand. That'll save you time. Then you'll have less cutting because you'll be concise and you won't be so verbose. You're wonderful with words, they'd say. Wonderful. Compliment me and then cut it in half. So let's see. All right. So that's that there. Enough of all that exposition. So today we are talking about causality and causation, the principle of cause and effect. This is understanding this principle and then understanding the message at the end of the chapter of the Kybalion is kind of a key to happiness, in my opinion. By that, I mean that it gives you a sense. Let's save this right here. Pull out the book. Okay. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes for a moment. You'll have to forgive me. I want to make sure I don't put the horse in front of the buggy, as it were. All right, so the chapter begins with a discussion on chance. And the reason why this is important, okay, I remember now where I was going. Remember, I apologize, folks. All right, here we go, rebooting. This section can also be applied to everything that you wish to direct towards the sphere of Netzik in the tree. What do I mean by that? Netzik, as you may recall, is the seventh sphere. I'm going to pull up a tree for you guys so you can see it. And there we go. Let's share the screen. All right, so Netzik is the seventh sphere, right here. It's green, one seen in the world of Braya, but don't let that confuse you. Just for now, it's green. In the advanced studies course, that makes more sense. For now, we're looking at primary and secondary colors, and everything that we talk about relative to causation and cause and effect can be seen here. Remember that 7 is associated with luck, but and lady luck, right? And expressions of luck are often garbed in green clothing, correct? This is all speaking to this particular sphere and its function, which we absolutely misunderstand. The common assumption is that when you petition Lady Luck, that the luck will turn in your favor, that there's some superior law out there in the universe that allows you to circumvent law, right? Cause and effect, that somehow or another I'm going to be able to manipulate probability in my favor, regardless of what I've done previously. And that some intercessor, an avatar, the Lady Luck, will step in its place. This is not how luck works. In this realm, luck simply changes hands, favorable to unfavorable, unfavorable to favorable. When we have a turn of luck and it's tied to a 7, the best example of this is the game of craps that you can play in Las Vegas. When you begin and roll a 7, you are winning. And you have to keep rolling that 7 or an 11 and keep rolling that in whatever combination you can to keep winning. At that point, everyone on the table is betting on you to lose, and they're betting on a different number to win, right? So because they're waiting for your luck to turn, often they'll bet against the guy who's casting the dice. But if you then roll something other than a 7, then you lose. If you are rolling something at the beginning of the game other than a 7 or 11, then like a 2 or a 5 or whatever, well, then you get to keep playing until you roll that 7. Then the dice changes hands again. So the idea then of the number 7 is also tied to the idea of the ancient concept of casting dice, which really relates, as the text describes on page 111, the word is to fall. And so that when you think about that in terms of the game of craps, if you roll a 7, you fall. You're over, you're done, right? Somebody loses, somebody wins. And you can't constantly stay at that number. Eventually you'll drop down. So that idea of luck is that's what luck is it's simply just the exchange of things. When something happens that seems lucky, what really is happening is that we're witnessing the effect of a cause that we don't understand. So everything is cause and effect from the very beginning all the way to the very end. I mentioned this when I was talking about when I read the tarot cards and how I would relate to some of my patrons. I'd say, hey, each reading is unique because there's a lot that goes into where the cards are going to be positioned for you personally, because all the readings I've done beforehand, me shuffling it, me straightening out the deck, and of course then how the deck was manufactured and the nature of the cards and the humidity, if they're sticky or not, like literally all of those things will determine how the cards play out. And so, but no matter what, it has nothing to do with luck. It's just a series of causes that I may not necessarily have witnessed or be aware of. So it's really important we remember that. The reason for this is, and the text then becomes exhaustive in this, is that all things abide by law. And causality winds up becoming the ultimate expression or outpouring of law. So that means that everything that goes before it, polarization, vibration, rhythm, those things are the result of their interaction becomes cause and effect. It becomes the events which we count and then mislabel as the dimension of time. So let's talk about time for a second. When this can be found on page 112, okay? And I'm switching glasses. It's about midway through the paragraph. It begins with cause and effect deals merely with events. An event is that which comes, arrives, or happens as a result or consequence of some preceding event. No event creates another event, but merely a preceding link in the great orderly chain of events flowing from the creative energy of the all. So how does this relate to the idea of time? When we describe time, we are merely describing events, whether it's seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years, millennia. These are just measures of counting. That's it. Now, the reason this is so important is because it frees your mind from the notion of the bondage that time is imposing on you. We are experiencing causality from moment to moment, which is a secondary revelation in and of itself. It is the underpinning reason behind why Netzik can be seen as green, why green is associated with growth, and why growth and life are synonymous. Because the principle of causality permits life to exist. by having a sequence of events, one leading into the next, we are able to create everything and procreate as human beings. So, and that procreative outpouring comes from Netzik taking each moment and seeing that one moment leads to the next. One event leads to the next event. So 1 second leads into the next second, and we are experiencing that as living beings. That's the sense of time that we have. But because we know that there is a sense of timelessness to ourselves, if we are deprived of the connections to time, and they've done multiple studies of this, that the body will lose track of, I mean, it's a torture thing that they do sometimes. They stick a person in a dark room, and then they just don't know what day it is anymore. They don't know what time it is, if it's morning or evening. If deprived of all the things that we could use to measure what time is, we begin to lose track of ourselves. We lose track of our memories, because our memories are hinged upon causality. Our memories are hinged upon a sequence of events which we then remember, which means to gather back into one thing. We are cobbling together sequences of the past in our mind to renew them in the present when we remember something. So it's why our memories are often so imperfect, because the present self reaching into the past is augmenting the understanding of the event that we experienced when the past was present. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. Hang on just a sec. All right. So this leads us to the next section. And it's found on page 114. And the section I want to highlight here is where they say, every thought we think, every act we perform, this is in the first bottom of the first paragraph, has its direct and indirect result, which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. What does this mean? It means that from moment to moment, we are recreating ourselves and refining ourselves and redefining ourselves from literal moment to moment, so that we have an opportunity, when presented in a state of awareness, we have the opportunity to choose a path. So the question is, how do we choose the path? What is the advice? Because there's a promise here at the end of the chapter. The promise is, in the very, very end of the chapter, is this: man may use law to overcome laws, and that the higher will always prevail against the lower, until at last he has reached the stage in which he seeks refuge in the law itself. What this means is that there's a point at which we turn cause and effect to our favor. We turn all of the events within the tree, we harmonize with it. And the means by which we do that is described on the previous page when it says the masters, this is page 115, bottom paragraph. But the masters, knowing the rules of the game, rise above the plane of material life and placing themselves in touch with the higher powers of their nature, dominate their own moods, characters, qualities, and polarity, as well as the environment surrounding them, and thus become movers in the game instead of pawns, causes instead of effects. Remember, I was talking about this, that when you study Kabbalah, you switch. There's a transition where you go from NPC to PC. You know, NPC is a non-player character, and a PC is a player character in video games. And the NPC is the guy you go to maybe to get some food or quest or whatever. They simply are window dressing to the world. One of the funny NPC, this is just a sidebar, but it cracks me up every time, that people wonder about if this is simulation or not, is this: when was the last time you saw your neighbors get their groceries? Do they get groceries? I don't know. Anyway, it's one of those things. No one's chuckling, so obviously. Hard room, I see. Okay. Anyway, the idea here is what are the masters doing then? If they understand that there's a system in place of cause and effect, and they want to rise above that, which law do they appeal to rise above it? I think there's really only one, and it's the one directly above it, found in Chesed, which is the principle of vibration. We know that the principle of rhythm is something that we cannot control whatsoever. Rhythm is equivocated scripturally to vengeance, meaning what comes around goes around, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And the Lord is the sun, and the sun is Tiprit, and Tiprit resides within the principle of rhythm. It is the ultimate definer of the rhythm of our conscious state from moment to moment, day to day, year to year. So it resides there. There's nothing we can do about it. That leaves polarization. But the problem with polarization is actually dependent upon vibration. For one to polarize, one must vibrate. And so the law to which you would seek refuge from all other laws, including rhythm, would be vibration, which means that by elevating one's vibratory state, one is able to find freedom from the implication of the lesser laws. This is explained on page, and we're going to talk about this in advanced studies as well, but in brief, this is explained on page 114 of the reading. At the very bottom of the second paragraph, the ancient writers express the matter thus: the further creation is from the center, the more it is bound. The nearer the center it reaches, the nearer free it is. So if you recall, with the up, down, in, out, as you move away from the center, your vibration drops, and therefore you become bound. As you move yourself toward the center, which is also moving up and in, then your vibration, then you find that you are freed, because you are able to, you're unaffected. It's different than freedom, really. It's being unimpaired. There is no counter vibration to joy. That, in other words, that would impair joy when you're up there. When your vibration is from the inside, when it is not the result of an external influence, because you can have an externally influenced joy, right? I'm so happy and things are going great and I feel joyful, and that kind of works its way to the inside. But the moment the outside's wiped out, that joy is gone. That means you're not free. You didn't actually raise your vibration. You simply experienced relief from a lower vibratory state, but are still an NPC, because you're dependent upon the environment to sustain you. As you work inward, and as you obtain an internal locus of control, that internal center where you are not dependent upon external inputs, you are joyful or happy or content or peaceful because that is your natural state, then that state is independent, and therefore you are unencumbered and you are free. Does that make sense? So I did it again. I kept this visual up the whole time. I keep forgetting to switch it so that we can all see each other. But anyway, you'll have to forgive me. But that's the idea there. That's the concept as taught here within the Kybalion. It's the implication of the principle of cause and effect. That it reveals to us that time as a dimension does not exist. You can't contain time. You can't put a ruler out and measure it. You can't hold on to it. You absolutely can't save it. There's nothing you can do, and all of us experience it at exactly the same level. Whether we're a gazillionaire or completely impoverished, all of us every day are given exactly the same amount of it. It's what we do with it that's important. That's what defines you. And that's where, when it talks about every thought we think, every action we perform has its direct and indirect results, which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. What we do with our time will eventually affect someone else and their time. If we make ourselves unavailable, that will have an impairing effect on the universe, right? Because we're no longer at hand. When you understand this principle of causality, you will never again say, why me? Because the answer is self-evident. Because you were at hand. That's why you got picked, because you were there, because there was a whole sequence of events that literally led you to that decision point, that event, that thing that happens, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, that explains the why you and relieves you of feeling picked on or anything else. Every experience becomes karmic. And I'm not talking about like karma, like the eternal charge account that we place out there. So I do so many good deeds and then I karmically can expect something good to happen. We all know the universe doesn't really operate like that. What the universe does do, though, is honor vibration. So that if you have a sustained upwelling of vibration, and it is your character, your nature, to be someone who seeks the light, seeks and to be a participant in outpouring, seeks to help others, to benefit themselves, and by seeking to improve themselves, they improve the environment around them. It is impossible to work on this and improve yourself and not have that directly impact your environment. It absolutely is not. Just like it is not possible for someone with internal chaos to not affect their environment with chaos, because that's going to happen. What is inside here is what gets expressed out there. And it starts with our mouth usually. And then it goes from there. But if we have the vibratory state where it's elevated, and it's legitimately elevated, this is from within. You're doing it because it's just become that. And here are the stages, by the way. These are the stages. There are actually stages to this that you will experience. And I saw this when I was teaching on a religious level. And what it is this: when people are given commandments, right? The first stage of obedience is I'll do it because I was told to do it. That's why I do it. I'm going to do that. And then they do that. And and this is how, by the way, religion, this is the intent of religion. This is how religion raises people and their vibration. It's the hope. It doesn't always happen because people lose their sight in superficiality and we build all kinds of idols for ourselves and forget what they're for. But the intent is, okay, so I do it because I'm told. Later, as we grow up, we recognize as adults that the things we were told to do are probably a good idea. We're doing it because, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Not killing people, not stealing, not doing all this other horrible stuff, being honest in all my dealings, making sure that that's, and by that, I mean, your honesty is a truthful expression of yourself, as well as just making sure that you relate objective reality correctly to the best of your ability, like not obfuscate, being honest. We decide, yeah, that's a good thing. Later on, that's stage 2. We do it because it's a good thing. Stage 3, the real in-depth stage, we do it because it's our nature, because that's just who you are. It wouldn't cross my mind to lie to a person, say. It wouldn't cross my mind to take someone's things or break them or deface a public object. It just wouldn't, because that's not my nature anymore. Because that's the purpose of religion, is that it raises people up over time and teaches them through metaphor and allegory that these principles are useful and contemporary. But the ultimate goal of all of this, including Kabbalah and the Kybalion and all of this, it's designed to provide for you tools to assist you in the steps along the way. All of us begin doing stuff at least because we're told to do a thing, and then later we think, it's not a bad idea, I'm going to explore that. And the depth of our exploration determines our commitment later. So the more you're willing to dig, the more that becomes your nature as you dig into it, because you feed upon it. It becomes you, because your thoughts become the things that you're studying, the things that you wish to learn about. You'll find that those thoughts will migrate into other things. And the next thing you know, you're watching a TV show and you're like, wow, I'm suddenly witnessing mythology right in front of my face. I get it. Wow, I get connection. And then you might even tear up. I still tear up in the Iron Man Thanos fight scene in Infinity War. That is Mars versus Jupiter duking it out, and Jupiter just going, you know what? I hope they remember you one day. You're awesome. And we do. We do. Mars is a hero and a villain, but a hero. He's that guy. Anyway. There is a downside to a higher level of vibration. You will find that in magic, there's a thing called a gias. It's a compulsion that might prevent you from doing a thing or speaking about a certain thing. And as your vibration elevates, you might find that you can no longer talk about what you witness. You can only experience it. The joy of it. You may lack words. And that can be overwhelming. So, you want to keep that in mind. You're going to wind up getting more sensitive. And by that, I mean sensitive in terms of a genuine appreciation for beauty. It's good to be moved. By beauty. Okay. So Any questions? How we doing? Doing good?
Well, I just had I could just relate to what you were saying because I was watching Arrival last night. I don't know if y'all seen Arrival. Oh my God. I could see pod thought in that with the giving of language.
Mhm.
And I was overwhelmed. I found myself like just bawling.
Yep.
And I know the first time that I watched it, it didn't affect me that way. But since, doing the studies and like you said, just everything that I've been studying with it just becoming like my thoughts and who I am, that's all I can see, and it's just like, it's beautiful. So I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I love that movie. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We're right on schedule. So if there are no more questions or comments, we'll take a short break, and I guess we'll start back up at 1 o'clock. Unless you guys have a little bit more you want to discuss. This pretty much covers time. We understand. Oh, I do want to point out, just like well, I think we covered time. Like it's just, this is mutually exclusive from contemporary physics that lumps time and space together as a single amalgam of something that they can then manipulate with mathematics and descriptive language. That's the case, because that's what it is. And as a result, it's in my opinion, it's created a great obfuscation of truth by lying to people and not teaching them what time actually is. By not representing ideas like time travel in the past. It's better now maybe, but in the past, ideas of time travel, and explaining that everything you're seeing is geocentric, meaning that the Earth isn't moving and the universe is spinning around the Earth, for any of their time machines to work, because they'd also have to cover great distances, right? To go back 1,000 years, we got to figure out where the Earth was 1,000 years ago. We don't know. We actually don't know. Like we could sort of figure it out, but to be precise, you'll wind up inside the crust or something. Just like, so it's and by not teaching us that, we lose the beauty of what time is, and that time is inextricably related to life. That time is the measure of life. That time is the measure of mortality, by virtue of the fact that from instant to instant, the three preceding principles are actualized, moment to moment. Vibration, polarity, rhythm. Vibration, polarity, rhythm. Vibration, polarity, rhythm. The whole idea of the pendulum swing going side to side, and that there is a potential for freedom from the bonds of what we interpret as time, not in terms of the aging of our bodies, but the preservation of our minds and the ability to move our minds then to any point in human consciousness. Because we're not talking then about time travel, I'm talking about consciousness travel. So if I wish to relocate my mind, and pro tip, going backward is always easier than forward. You can go forward. It just that forward is like looking at a tree with multiple branches and thick branches and little branches, and it gets confusing. Going back is established, so then you can then unify with established consciousness and get a sense of the experience of before time. You can witness astrological events take place. Sorry. It really sucks. It's like being enforced to not be able to say something. So anyway, but you can do these things. So
I have a question.
yes, please.
I know I was about 15 minutes late. I'm remembering the Greek concepts with the chronos, kairos, and I think it's nous. Did you talk about that, or how would those apply to what you're speaking of?
In terms of the gods of a god of time, for instance, or
Just time in general. Like I'm trying to remember what they mean. There's like, I think nous is like is that like the concept of perfect time, or
yeah,
I can
I
look it up
I'm
later.
gonna have to
I'm
look
not very
that up, to
following.
be
Yeah,
honest. We
yeah.
didn't cover that, and I didn't actually think to mention that. So thank you. If you want, I can bring that up next week, and we can take a look at that. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of looking at the avatars associated with time, and then breaking the name down. It's interesting that you mentioned about um, the name, because we're going to talk about that in the next period, where the names are formulae, which then lets you know the who, what, and where of the power that you're drawing upon. So we'll talk about that more. I don't want to steal my thunder in the other class, but basically there's going to be a discussion on that part, but I didn't consider looking at, for instance, the root and suffix of each of the god names to see in particular what they were. If you like, I could take a look into that, or you're welcome to, and then report to the group what you find.
Yeah.
Aha!
I just volunteered.
We choose you. And
Yep.
you're like, why me? Because you were at hand.
Yep. I literally raised my hand. Yeah.
Oh, good. I like that.
Great
All right.
segue.
I'm looking forward to hearing about it. I'll also look into it. So, any other questions?
Were you gonna do the Matrix clip in this one, or were you
Oh,
gonna
yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. So I had a clip from the Matrix. It's the Merovingian clip, and it starts at it's 1:14. Okay, there we go. And let's pop that back there. There we go. So this is a clip from The Matrix, which, by the way, I have to say, in reviewing the movies again, The Matrix is really an awesome display of Gnostic philosophy on multiple levels, and then using different god forms as expression of different interactions. For instance, Trinity, the number 3, then her, the idea of a Binah type thing, or the sacred feminine, and just all the things that tie with it and how she relates, and Morpheus and where Neo falls into place. And it's just really cool. In this case, they're seeking the Keymaster in this scene, and they had to go to the Merovingian to find out why. And the Merovingian and Morpheus have this brief duking it out verbally of which is superior, causality or free will. And because and I'll not say anymore. We'll just see if this works. You guys.
It is a possible. You see, there is only one constant, one universal. It is the only real truth. Causality. Action, reaction, cause, and effect. Everything begins with choice. No, wrong. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
That is, by the way, a very profound observation, because if he is wrong. He's only telling half the truth here. Remember, the principle of polarity indicates that all truths are half truths. So he's only giving us half the story because he's a person in power who then has the power to influence cause and effect by either giving or withholding information. This is the guy that's spoken of in the text where his actions, his thoughts, his deeds are then influencing the outside world. And this is how the Merovingian maintains a locus of control around himself by being an information broker. So him saying that choice is an illusion by those with power given to those without, this is true, when especially when looking at like American politics, where we're given, the turd sandwich or the, whatever, it doesn't matter, douchebag or turd sandwich. I think that's what South Park did once, it's like you don't want to do either. Or the whole idea of, hey, if I baked you a cake and put my finger in some dog poop and mixed it in the batter, would you still eat it? I mean, it's like a dog poop cake. Yeah, sure. You probably won't ever taste it, but it's in there, and so he's being that baker sticking his finger in the cake, right? And in fact, he does exactly that in this scene. Here's his example.
There's that woman. My God, just look at her. Affecting everyone around her, so obvious, so bourgeois, so bold. What you see, I have sent her a dessert. Very special dessert. I wrote it myself. Each line of the program creating a new effect, just like poetry. First, a rush, heat, the heart.
So in this, we can see a metaphor for what we consume, that a lot of our choices are influenced by the bakers out there, and what we consume will determine our responsiveness to our environment. This is all that external locus of control stuff that I was talking about. So you might consume, let's say, a TV show, or you might consume an afternoon with the family, or you might consume any number of these other things, and they will elevate your mood, feed your soul, right? Make you feel better. But once that goes away, you're still subject to the principle of rhythm. It rises, it falls, it goes to its apex and its nadir. It never stays the same. The only thing that's constant is the constant change. So the advantage of recognizing, if you were the girl in that scene, how would you avoid the predator of the Merovingian? Because he's going to prey on her next. He gave her something to roofie her there. That's why I paused it. But he was basically doing something to influence her. That same influence can be drawn out in any number of ways. We can be influenced to make certain decisions, buy certain products, act certain ways, and we have to ask ourselves, as good alchemists, if I wish to transmute my day, how much control of myself do I have? That's why the adage temet nose, know thyself, is key. Because if you don't actually understand what it is that's driving you, you can't, in spite of that piece of cheesecake, you can't resist it, because you're just going to be pushed right along with that whatever program you consumed. You can still consume the other stuff, but if you're awake, then you have a choice. You're aware. You can go, wow, okay, well, that was some cheesecake, but I don't need to go anywhere. That was just, okay, I won't do that twice, and move forward. The key to transmutation is always a forward momentum. There's never just this absolute stillness, and that's because you are relying upon the principle of vibration, which states that everything is in constant motion. So the key to freeing yourself from lower vibratory states or laws which might impinge upon your freedom, you elevate that state, you lift it up. And you do that through methods like this. when we get into the next section in the advanced studies class, we're going to talk more about this and about the nature of one's vibe and light and darkness. But for now, right here, realize that in terms of the Kybalion and causality, that we are given the tools to determine what we wish to do with ourselves, right? Like we're not bound to everything. There is freedom for us, and the freedom comes from working closer to the inside, getting into that center, that sacred light. All right. And then next week, Chronos, and I forget the third one. What's the third one? I forget. Thanks, Gypsy. All right. Well, thank you, guys. This has been great. And we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Are there any other questions before I hook off, or are we good? We're good? Good? Thumbs
All
up?
good. No,
Awesome. We'll
Thanks,
see you guys
Alex.
at 1 o'clock.
thank you.
Bye.